only really time I've tried to hide my blindness is maybe during a job interview, or when I showed up to drive the jet ski. I just put on some sunglasses and
Oh my
I
goodness.
was like, I got this.
Welcome to the Blind Mom Life Podcast. I'm your host, Chelsey Painter Davis, blind wife, mother, and pro-life Christian speaker. I want to invite you to dive deep with my special guests and I as we talk conquering disabilities, cherishing motherhood, and choosing life. Are you ready? Action. Hey guys, time for another movie, and we are talking Avatar. Yes, the one with the blue people. I got the privilege of watching this film before I lost my vision, so I got to enjoy how beautiful and artistic the landscape, the animals, all of the beauty of Pandora was in this film, and it was so thrilling and exciting to get to watch. But the other thrilling part of the story was getting to see Jake Sully, a man who had lost mobility in his legs, be connected into an avatar where he could see, breathe, feel just like he used to before his accident, and get to stick his toes in the dirt once again, feel that sensation, run through the forest, and really live his life in a full sensation capacity. It is so cool, and you're just so moved by that. Wow, that is an amazing gift. But sadly, that's not something that often happens for most disabled people in our real lives, ones that aren't just in the movies. We have a body that has limitations, that has handicaps, that has ailments, and we can't just switch into an avatar and live a whole fully uninhibited life like Jake Sully could in Avatar. We have what we have, and sometimes that means there's things that we can't do. But the best part about my guest, Selena, is that her story shows us that you don't have to quit. You don't have to stay isolated. You don't have to give up on your dreams, give up on yourself, because even in a body that has limitations, even when there's disability or handicap, you can still experience the world in an incredible and amazing way. Maybe it's not exactly like Jake Sully running through the forests of Pandora after being gifted a new avatar body, but it's still good, it's still great, and it's still beautiful. So I'm so excited for you to meet Selena and hear all about her fearless blind adventures. So I am so excited to have you on the podcast. Why don't you introduce yourself for the audience?
My name is Selena Sundling. I live in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I'm excited to talk about travel.
Yeah. Why don't you explain for our sighted audience what your eye condition is and what that means that you're able to see?
Okay. I was born totally blind and with cataracts. And when they removed those, I had just lots of problems that came up: detached retina, ripped retina, closed pupil. So they did a lot of surgeries. And during one of the surgeries, I got glaucoma when I was 6. And
oh my gosh.
Yeah, so I've had glaucoma since then. And I have 10% eyesight in one eye, so that makes me legally blind in my better eye. And my other eye just sees maybe 3 to 5%, kind of depends. And that's with my glasses.
Okay, wow. So those surgeries you were having, were those like right when you were born, or did they wait until you got a little older?
Yeah, you have to see by the time you're 6 months old, or you'll never see. So I had my first surgery when I was 3 months old. Then they did the other surgery when I was 5 months old, and then I've had glasses ever since. And I've never had more than 10% in my better eye, and I've had 24 eye surgeries altogether. And there was a lot when I was 4, a lot when I was 7, and then kind of just in between here and there.
That is a crazy amount of eye surgeries.
Yeah.
So, how did you first start getting interested in travel? Like, that sounds like such an ambitious thing to do. I know a lot of people look at blind people and they're like, oh my gosh, how do you go anywhere? And you're traveling all over the world. Can you tell us about how that started?
Yeah, I never wanted to travel before because I was always very afraid of airplanes and flying. So I would say all the time, I'm never flying, never ever. And I've actually had dreams that I die in an airplane crash since I was 8 years old. So it was a really huge fear of mine. And in my college years, I got invited to an NFB convention, and they paid for my ticket. And I thought, well, I'm gonna do it, And I flew from Detroit to Dallas, and then I was still afraid. I'm still afraid of flying, but I just kind of little by little started going here and there, just in the U.S. And then my husband and I started traveling in 2003, and we went on our first cruise. It was like a 3-day, $250 cruise, and I really liked that. And it was just interesting, I thought, to go to another country, just
Mhm.
Mexico and the Bahamas. And then we planned another cruise a couple years later, and just kind of slowly got into it. And then we started doing just going on our own by land. And then we started combining them, and I got more leave at work and started making more money. So we started going longer. So I go for like a month at a time now.
Oh,
And we
wow.
started racking up the countries. And so we use Sky Miles to fly. And so now I've been to 65 countries.
That is amazing. Like, that's an amazing amount for a fully able-bodied person to have gone to 65 countries. That's crazy.
Yeah,
Can
it
you
is.
Can you walk us through the logistics on how you can travel as a visually impaired person? Like a lot of people, I know, unfortunately, for some people, when they first lose their vision, they feel very trapped in their
Yeah.
home and they think they can't go anywhere. So, can you talk through like those first steps of gaining confidence? Even to just like leave your home and then the transition to like, well, I'm going to see the rest of the world.
For me, I mean, I don't think leaving my home was a big thing since I dealt with this as a
Right.
child. So that wasn't as much of a big deal. Um, when we started traveling, I don't know, our first cruise was with a group of friends that I worked with. So that was pretty comfortable. Um, I don't know. We've always kind of just done what we wanted to do. The logistics, I would say, first you've got kind of the same logistics for anyone to travel. You got to pick where you're going and make a budget and save for it and make those reservations, your plane reservation and any tours reservations, or day tours or a group tour, your cruise line, anything you're going to do, you got to make those reservations. And then for
Hmm.
traveling as a blind person, you really have quite a bit more to do. For me, I spend hours and hours, sometimes even for these month-long trips. If I'm visiting like 9 countries, I could spend hundreds of hours, like 300 plus hours planning the trip,
Oh my
because I
goodness.
have to deal with all of the transportation issues in each country.
Hmm.
Learning maybe their local buses, or just figuring out what order to do things in. It can be like a logistical nightmare, And as a blind person, you really got to nail that down, because you don't want to be lost all the time. I mean, you're just wasting your time. So you want to know which mode of transportation you're going to take, and how all that's going to work.
Can you give us some examples of how that's played out on a trip?
Well, London, that was, I call it a European tour. London is my favorite city, and it's so great. You have like 6 different options when you want to go places. But planning the trip, it works very smoothly once we got there. But that's because I put in the time of planning. Planning the
Mhm.
trip at first was just daunting. It was very overwhelming because there was so much to do. And it's like, we're going to all these cities in Europe, and it's like, okay, I've got all these places I want to go. And I like to go, go, go. So for me, like a tour day is like 16 to 20 hours. Like, we are not sleeping that
Whoa.
night. We are go, go, go. How many places can I see? How many things can I do? Because, we never know if we'll be back. So I don't want to miss
Mhm.
anything. So in order to plan those things, you're talking about a new city that you've never been to before. So you have to first figure out where everything is located, so you can group things near each other. You don't want to be backtracking all day. That's a waste of time. So you got to group things near each other. You got to figure out, well, how much time do I think I'll need at each place, because maybe, in a certain day, maybe you'll have 2 or 3 things that are 5 hours. So that's a lot longer than just, 30-minute stop here and there. So you got to
Yeah.
figure out all that stuff first and group the stuff together. Then you actually, once you put it all in order, then you actually know, okay, how do I get from point A to point B? Because then you finally know what point B is. So you're going from your
Hmm.
hotel to, a Gothic church or something like that.
Uh-huh.
So how am I going to get there? You got 6 different options. So you just start checking it out methodically. Option one, option two, you got the underground, the overground, the hop on, hop off bus, just tons of different options. Wikipedia was a huge help to me with the subway system there, and it
Hmm.
really helped me to know which train to take and which direction. I could count the stops so that I would know, in case, because sometimes on those trains the audio might get turned off, or maybe it's muffled and you can't really understand it. So I want to know, how many stops is it going to be. I want to know time wise, is that going to be a 15-minute trip, a 35-minute trip? I got to know that so that I know about when, well, I might have missed the stop before it's too late.
Oh
So
my goodness. That is so intense, but that makes sense, like, when you can't just hop in your car and drive
yes.
yourself somewhere or just kinda wander around aimlessly until you
Yeah,
see a sign.
that's a huge difference. Like, I know some sighted people that love to travel and they go, "Oh, we like to just wing it when we get there." There's no winging it for us. Cuz maybe we'll be in a city where there's no transportation. So I mean, we got to know ahead of time before we plan a trip if we're going to be able to get around and do
Mhm.
what we want to do.
So how do you so you I'm trying to understand this London trip. I've actually been to London before. I went on a study abroad trip with my husband when I was in college, and I was part of a big tour group, so I just fully followed the guide everywhere I went. I didn't have to do hardly any thinking at
That's
all.
nice.
It was nice. Um, but like I noticed we were staying at a hostel in Soho. And even just like when me and my husband would try to walk somewhere by ourselves, the streets were so crowded. When I would try to pull out my white cane, it would constantly get not just bump into other people, but get caught on people because we were so
Ah.
congested in the crowd. What strategy do you have just from the first step of the transportation, like getting from your hotel down to the tube in London? Like, do you take tips like from the hotel that you're staying at, or do you research that ahead of time?
Oh, all kinds of things. Yeah, sometimes the hotels will put stuff on their website, like getting here. There's a getting here section, and
Hmm.
there could be, again, 5, 6 different options. So I'll look at that. What looks like the least difficult, not just time wise, but am I going to have to do 5 different trains, or can I just like walk 2 blocks and cut that trip down to 2 trains? You just got
Yeah.
to research, like I said, methodically, just step one, step two, step three, and just go in order. We didn't really have the problem with the cane in the crowds. My husband
Hmm.
is totally blind, I should say, and so he uses a cane. At night, sometimes I'll use a cane too. And if I'm traveling without him in a foreign country, then I usually use my cane during the day as well. But
Right.
yeah, we didn't have the crowd issues. But just researching, I mean, I use Google. I'll look at reviews on places, and there's so much information out there, with the internet. But that's how you can see where it would be 300 hours. You just keep going down rabbit hole after rabbit hole and trying to find the best option. And sometimes it's the best of several bad options, and sometimes there's some great choices. It just depends.
Yeah. So did you always have this like this is going to come across to like all sighted people as like a massively like fearless personality. Did you grow up that way, or is it a skill that you've kind of worked on the more you've exposed yourself to the rest of the world?
um A little bit of both. Like, as far as doing things, my husband and I are both adrenaline junkies. So I love doing, crazy stuff like skydiving, bungee jumping, hang gliding. I always had that. I had a teacher in elementary school that was totally blind. So he really instilled in us that we can do anything. Not just by saying it, but by actually demonstrating it. So he would have
Mhm.
us do, races in the community. He would take us camping, have us go downhill skiing, you know, as fast as we can over moguls we can't see. So we always had that well-roundedness. It wasn't difficult for me to do that. But as far as like socially goes, like I'm very shy. I don't like meeting new people. It's a little bit difficult for me. So that's gotten a lot better, as I've gotten older. And every time you just get outside of your comfort zone a little bit, it'll help you the next time, and you just do a little bit more and a little bit more. So like a group tour, I've been on, I think, 2 group tours. That's something I really couldn't have done in the beginning.
So what is your favorite you said London is your favorite place you've traveled to, but what is your
Mm.
favorite experience that you've done on these trips? What's been the most meaningful or the most exciting to you with that adrenaline junkie personality?
Yeah. Yeah, London's my favorite city just because of the transportation issue.
Mhm.
But as far as like my favorite place in the world, that's really tough. I get asked this a lot, but it's kind of like apples to oranges. You can imagine, like, we've been to Iceland, and the beauty of Iceland is just incredible. I mean, depending on, no matter what season you go, depending on where you are in the country, you can almost experience like any of the 4 seasons at any given time. And we did amazing things, like we did a dry suit dive where we could reach our arms out and touch the North American continent and the European continent, and that was awesome. But that's vastly different from like Egypt, where you get to see the Great Pyramid and go inside of it. That's incredible. But it's apples to oranges. We've been to the Maldives. We had the over the water bungalows over this amazing beautiful ocean, stuff like that. For adrenaline, gosh, we've done so much. But I'll tell you a great place that I think is great for blind people to go, and that is the UAE, the United Arab Emirates. We spent the most time there. We spent 6 days in Abu Dhabi and 10 days in Dubai. And the people are just so welcoming and so awesome. They call us people of determination. So it just really gets into their psyche. So they don't think of us as like disabled people. They think of us as people that have a little bit of a challenge, and we still get out and do whatever we want. So just the way that they speak to you is with much more respect, and there is a ton of stuff to do. We love like 3 things. Like, I love architecture, and
Mhm.
we both love shopping. Believe it or not, my husband is a big shopper, so we love shopping. And then we love adrenaline, and every single day I could pack in all 3 of those things to different places every single day, and it was just amazing.
That's awesome. So, a lot of people would hear what you're saying about seeing all these places and the beautiful architecture. And I think that they might have trouble understanding like how us as blind people can still enjoy something even if we can't see it the same way that most people do. Could you expand on that a little bit? What it's like to
Yeah.
experience it differently?
Well, for example, I might see an interesting looking building, but I can't really see the details on it. But
Hmm.
I can take a picture and zoom in on the picture, and I can see it that
Oh,
way.
wow.
And
Yeah, that's awesome.
yeah, there's a lot of things. It's funny, in elementary school, they called us high partials, because we are legally blind, but
Hmm.
just on a little bit. I mean, just barely. And they would say that we have just enough eyesight to get ourselves into trouble. And one of the examples I have of this is, I remember I was it was taking this picture of this yellow flower. It looked like this really pretty flower. So I wanted to get really close, so it's real clear and big as the screen. And I took this picture, and I really liked it. Well, I got it home, and when I zoomed it in on my computer, I found that there was a bee on the flower, and I
Oh,
am highly allergic to bees. So I could have died taking that picture.
oh my goodness.
But that's it's just that the kinds of stuff like that where I can see, but I could easily miss some details that might be important. So
Yeah.
my camera, the iPhone is really made stuff a lot easier. If I'm looking for a certain street, in the early days I didn't even have data traveling, so I couldn't just ask
Right.
Siri or anything like that. There's all these like live maps and stuff. Some of them I use now. I couldn't do that then because I was data poor. So I would take a picture across the street, and I would zoom in on the sign so I could read the sign to find the right street.
That is so smart. Oh my goodness.
And that's how sometimes, like, in when we're shopping, the price tags might be too small for me to see. So I just take a picture of it and zoom in.
Mhm. That is a really cool way to just have a magnifier in your pocket all
Exactly.
the time. So what is it like? You said your husband is totally blind, right?
Yes.
How is the traveling for him? Does he have just as much fun as you do, or does he have a different experience and he kind of enjoys that you're enjoying?
Yeah, sometimes the first, sometimes the second. For you're talking about how he might experience things differently too. A lot of places will have audio guides, and we'll both use those. We'll both get a benefit out of those. Like in Europe, touring different churches or things like that, they'll have an
Mhm.
audio guide, and it'll really describe the room or statues, paintings. It gives really
Mhm.
good descriptions. And then there's been other places that too they'll have like a scaled model that is for blind people to feel. And
Oh,
I
I
remember
did
in
not know
Russia,
that.
yeah, I remember in Russia we were visiting, I think it's called the Church of the Blood or something, and it has, the onion tops. That's like an architecture signature of Russia, and you could feel all that. It was just a model right to scale, so I could then describe to him like what colors were where also. And
Mhm.
then they had something really cool in St. Petersburg. It was uh, a painting, and they had put this like molded raised plastic over the painting, and it was a woman on a horse, a general woman on a horse, and he could feel all that, and that was a really cool thing. And that
Oh,
was
that's
like
fascinating.
when we were traveling, walking through that on the tour, like every single tour guide, did you show him the painting? Did you show him the painting? They're like really excited. They're like, yes, you got to see this painting. So that was a really cool one.
Oh my goodness.
And then,
So what
like I said, the adrenaline stuff, I mean, that's where he really, gets the feel of things, zip lining, or, a lot of that stuff is about feel.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What are some of the challenges that you guys have run into in your traveling?
Um, well, there was one time in Turkey where the guide just left us outside of a carpet shop. We were actually on a cruise, and we had booked the tour from the cruise line because I thought, we didn't really know Turkey that well. We were a little nervous
Mhm.
about safety. So stress free, right? You book it through the cruise. What do? They pick you up, they take you back. They pick you up, they take you
Yeah.
back. That's the guarantee. They left us. And not just us, like the whole group. They're just like
Oh, wow.
like we were at a and it was like 11:30 at night. Okay,
Oh,
so
no.
totally dark. Now at nighttime I only have like 3% eyesight in my good eye.
Right.
And he said, okay, tour's over. I'm like, whoa, whoa, no, 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 no. I said, you have to take us back to the ship. That's the way this works. And he just kept arguing with me. Meanwhile, while we're arguing, like everyone else scattered and they're gone. And he refused. He would not take us back. And I'm like, oh my God, like the ship, like we have to be there by midnight or they're gonna leave us. And
Oh my gosh.
he just like pointed in a general direction. The ship's that way. I was like, oh dear God. So I mean, we just prayed and prayed, and I remember I didn't even realize that we were in the street right there because it there wasn't like any signs. It was all dark. There was no like
Mhm.
street lights or there was nothing. It was like pitch dark. And then I saw this
Oh my
car
goodness.
coming. I was like, "Oh my God, we're in the street!" And so we had to run across that street, and then we just kept walking in the general direction, hoping we would find something that would clue us into to where we were or something. And eventually we ran into some shops and asked some shop owners, are we going the right way? And they kept kind of pointing us in the right direction. And then they had the call for prayer, and then like everybody scattered, so there was nobody on the street. And we just kept walking and praying, and we found the ship.
Oh
But that
my
was that was a
goodness.
little bit scary.
A
Um,
little bit. That's terrifying, Selena. Oh my,
but
I can't believe he did that to you.
yeah, we got our money back. Let me tell you, we were
Oh,
most afraid
wow.
of them leaving us. God, we don't want to be
Yes.
left there, and they had our passports and everything too. So it's like, oh my gosh. Um, Another time, I think that honestly the biggest challenge comes in the U.S. because most of the
Mhm.
time. when we're out, that's why we choose to travel in other countries, because we get treated better. People don't discriminate against us for doing all the crazy stuff we like to do in other countries, but in the US they do. And that's where we had, the zip line issue, where they wouldn't let us zip line in Alaska, and it was insane because we'd already been zip lining all over the world.
Can you talk about that a little bit more? What happened with the zip line incident?
So it was Talkeetna, Alaska, and we showed up. We had a reservation, full paid, and we showed up to go ziplining. And the guy just took one look at us, and he's like, "No, you can't go ziplining." And we're like, "Sure we can. What do you mean?" And he kept arguing with us, and I brought up pictures on my phone to show him. We've done this before, and he
Hmm.
said, "Well, you can't see the commands." I said, "Well, what commands? What are you talking about?" And he does this motion with his hand, like come here, and then he holds up his hand like stop, And I'm like, "Well, here's a crazy thought. Just thinking outside the box. Why don't you just have him yell go and stop?" And he said, "You don't have to be a smart." And I was like, "Oh my gosh." Some people you can educate and let them know how wrong they are. And some
Hmm.
people just aren't educatable. It's just not possible. So
Hmm.
when we got home, we had to file a complaint with the Department of Justice. And that took about a year. It went to moderation. So we had a judge. I'm sorry, not moderation, arbitration. And we had a judge oversee it. And he had an attorney, and we basically chewed him up and spit him out. And we won, and they had to pay us a bunch of money, and also issue me. This is what we demanded, that they had to issue us a letter of apology in writing so that we could publish it to everyone, and
Hmm.
also that I had to write their new policy that they would keep up on their website and honor all the time.
Is that
So
common in travels or just life in general as a blind person for people to just look at you and say, no, you can't do this, you're not allowed?
yeah, I mean, once I see the white cane, or even sometimes just my really thick glasses,
Hmm.
yeah, in the U.S., yeah, and sometimes abroad it'll give them like pause, and then they usually say the same thing. Well, why didn't you tell us ahead of time? Well, because you would have said no. That's why. Because I
Hmm.
played that game before. I think it's a lot better to show up and be like, look, we're very confident, capable, blind people, and tell them in person about our experiences. Maybe show them some pictures of it so that they know it's legit. And I think it just works better. We're able to, talk our way in basically more often.
Hmm.
Um, it was interesting in Dubai. One of the things we did was called Deep Dive Dubai. It's the deepest swimming pool in the world, and
Okay.
we signed up for a scuba dive. And when we showed up, yeah, they were like, "Oh, I wish you would have told us ahead of time." And I was like, "Oh, I can't believe it here of all places. The UAE. I already knew what their attitudes were, and I was really surprised." And I was like, "We're both certified divers. This is fine." She's like, "No, it's not that. We have a whole team devoted just to people of determination, but we just didn't schedule them for today." And I was
Oh,
like,
wow.
"Oh." Yeah, that was a different response than I was used to. So she said, "Well, when else could you come back and do it?" So we looked at my itinerary, and we figured out like the only other time we could do it was like the very next morning. So she
Hmm.
called the team, and she's like, "Yes, we'll schedule you for the next morning with the people that do this." And then it was fine. But normally speaking, that's why I don't like to tell people ahead of time, because they'll usually say no. But that was really refreshing that they had a whole team devoted to that, and they knew about it. It was cool.
Where do you think that the resistance comes from when you face discrimination like that? You said a lot of the times in the US. Like,
Yes.
do you think they're really trying to help, or do you think they're
No.
just that confused? What's
Oh,
going on?
it's stereotypes. It's
Mhm.
stereotypes. And just like with the zipline company, they would say, "Well, it's not discrimination." Oh, hold on, my light just went out. Let me fix this. Okay. They'd say, it's not discrimination if it's in the name of safety. I said, "No, you're wrong." I said, "Every single time a sighted person has ever discriminated against a blind person, it is always in the name of safety, but it's not real safety. It's your perception of safety. It's not that blind people can't zip line safely. It's that you think blind people can't zip line safely. And that doesn't make it legal for you to discriminate, because you're wrong."
Mhm.
I'm not trying to drive a
Yeah.
car. So, I mean, that's what it is right there. It's their
Yeah.
perception, and their perceptions come from what? From stereotypes.
What do you so you said the best way is to just kind of surprise them and then like reassure them that everything is going to go fine. Have you run into what are the best tips for calming people down when they get all freaked out? They're like, "Oh no, this blind person is going to die if they zip line." Like
Right.
it doesn't always work, but what are the best tips
Yeah,
for
I mean,
really
it
getting someone
always
to understand?
depends on the person, so you just never know what's going to work or not. But I think to try to stay calm, which is difficult when somebody's trying to tell you no. Try to
Mhm.
stay calm and, smile and just sell yourself on, look, this is not a big deal. Um, in their head, it's like a really big deal. So you got to just, let them know this is not a big thing. Okay. Close your eyes. Did you get any dumber? No, you didn't. No brain cells died. It's okay. I'm not steering the zip line. It's okay. And just kind of bring them into reality, so to speak, that this is not a big deal like you think it is.
Mhm. What are your favorite we talked about transportation before. What are the easiest ways for you to get transportation? And then what are the most difficult and challenging?
Well, definitely easiest would be like Uber and Lyft. Those have been life changing for us in the US for sure. But you can use those in a lot of other countries,
Mhm.
or countries will have their own version of those. So we'll
Okay.
download those apps ahead of time. Like in the UAE, it's Kareem, and there's a lot of different ones. So that's the easiest. It's private. It's usually very fast. Sometimes it's inexpensive. Sometimes it's more expensive. The subway, if there's a subway, I really like subways. They seem to run on time and frequent, and it's easy to find out what direction to go in and how many stops,
Mhm.
things like that. So that'd be probably my other favorite. In uh, Dubai, there was so many taxis. It was like more taxis than New York City, and they were so easy to get, and they were so cheap. So we just taxied
Oh,
everywhere.
wow.
So cheap. Like we just stand on the side of the road, and you just hail a cab. You just raise your arm up and wave, and you know they pull over and you go, and you might go for a ways, and it's like $3. It was really cool.
Oh my goodness.
It was better
So
than
I
having a
have
car.
so I have to ask you about the tube in London, their underground transportation. So every time that I went down there, I was terrified. I like it made me feel like I was being like buried alive. So there was that component. And then like right before I went on my trip, that I had seen this news story where this lady was like shoving people in front of the subway in New York. So the whole time I
Yes.
was down there, I was like, where are the crazy people? Where are they? Where's the giant hole for me to not
Yeah.
step in? And I remember everybody saying things like, mind the gap, mind the gap.
Mind the
But
gap.
the,
Yeah.
the way that they talk about it in London, I thought it was like a foot gap that I had to jump over. And so every time I got off the tube, I was jumping, and my husband was like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm minding the gap. I don't want to die. And he was like, no, Chelsey, they're being funny. Like, and I was like, what? They've been
No,
freaking me out for days.
well, okay. I mean, New York, totally different than most cities abroad, because there is a lot more crime. So yeah, in New York, you have to watch your back. You have to be very aware of your surroundings. Always listening. Always aware. I would never be alone there. It's a totally. I mean, I love New York. I love New York, but it's a totally different experience. You got to be careful. London and those places are so safe. I mean, those people don't even have guns. So it's super safe. And the gap, mind the gap, that's one of our favorite sayings. We use that all the time because it covers a multitude of things. Mind the gap. It means, really just use your cane and that there's a gap. Is it a 2-inch gap? Is it a 2-foot gap? Use your cane.
Mhm.
Are you stepping like maybe off a tender onto the shore or onto the main ship? It could be higher or lower that you're having to step, and so it just covers that. You just use your cane real quick and feel it, and then you'll know. Because in London, like you're saying, when they say mind the gap all the time, there were some that were just a few inches, but there were some that were a little bit closer to a foot, it seemed like. So mind the gap just kind of covers everything instead of trying to be real descriptive. your cane's going to find it better and give you a better description than somebody trying to verbally explain it anyway, you know.
Yeah, that's true. Can you give us some safety tips for blind travel? Like, how do you feel confident and assured that things are going to be okay? I mean, like, as long as like your cruise tour guide doesn't ditch you.
Right. um I think, just always listening to your surroundings. If you have any vision, always looking around. I really believe in women's intuition. And, if the hairs on the back of your neck start to stand up, then you need to pay attention to that, because there's probably a reason. So we've
Hmm.
been places where there seemed like there was somebody shady, or maybe there
Hmm.
was a conversation going on that didn't sound like it was going to end well. We would just kind of remove ourselves from the situation, just kind of slowly walk away.
Hmm.
So
I've when I was doing training in vocational rehab, like within those first couple years of me losing my vision, one of my instructors, she actually told me, she's like, it's safer when you travel to pretend that you're not as blind as you really are, because people can see you as a vulnerable victim when they perceive you as like 100% blind. Do you feel like that's true, where you try to pretend like you know more of what's going on than you actually do? Or do you not find that to be very impactful?
um the thing is, I mean, when I'm traveling with my husband, for sure he's going to have a cane, so you
Hmm.
can't really hide that. I mean,
Yeah.
it
That's
is
why I
what
was confused. I was like, how do I hide that I'm blind? Like, what are you
it,
talking
it
about?
is what it is. I think the only really time I've tried to hide my blindness uh is maybe during a job interview. Or when I showed up to drive the jet ski, I just put on some sunglasses and
Oh my
I was
goodness.
like, I got this, you know. But yeah, usually I don't really hide it. Like I said, even like my husband recently, he couldn't go to uh Australia with me, so I had to go by myself, and I use my cane. I just
Hmm.
think it's safer. I don't want to fall and hurt myself.
Yeah.
So it's just safer, and I would rather be safer that way than worried about. Yeah, maybe it does kind of paint a little bit of a target on your back, but as long as you just exercise, reasonable precaution, wherever you're at. I mean, anybody that's traveling in any city, crime is everywhere, so you always have to kind of just exercise precaution.
Hmm.
But
What can you,
I wouldn't think it was a reason to not go.
yeah. What can you say, like, what's one piece of hope or advice that you can give to the blind person who's sitting at home and at this time in their life, like they really do believe like they can't leave their house. They really feel trapped. And like I know I felt that way when I first lost my vision. I didn't feel like I could go anywhere unless I had a sighted person dragging me along. Like, what can you say to just kind of encourage them?
I would say that you absolutely can. You're not alone. You're not the first. So maybe reach out, try to find some other people in the blind community to, help nurture you and shepherd you along. Start off small, you know. I mean, if you're really that afraid, then, maybe you need to challenge yourself to walk to the mailbox every day and check your own mail and walk back. Get that down. Then maybe walk around the block. Might be the next thing. Wherever you are at, that is okay. Just
Mhm.
challenge yourself to do the next thing. Don't think so big and something's just so daunting. Just challenge yourself for that next step, that next thing. Give yourself, permission to do these little victories, and they'll add up and your comfort zone will grow.
Thank you so much, Selena. I really appreciate you sharing about all your crazy, awesome adventures. That's amazing.
Thank
It's so
you.
encouraging to hear. You don't have to give up on yourself. You can be fearless. You can be brave. Just because you lost your vision or you have some other ailment or handicap, you don't have to stay home. You don't have to stay isolated. You don't have to remove yourself from the world. you don't have to give up on yourself. You can keep pushing, you can keep daring, you can keep adventuring. You just might have to do it differently than other people. But just like we saw with Selena, it is still worth it. And it is still fun. And it is still thrilling. It's just in a different way. Time for Ask Me Anything. So the first question I have for you today is, what is a travel destination you wish you could have seen before you lost your vision? Oh my goodness, this is a painful one. I wanted to go to Ireland so bad. I don't really know why, but ever since I was a kid, I just had this fantasy of getting to tour Ireland and looking at the beautiful landscape there. I used to set the background of my computer to Irish landscapes. I just thought they were gorgeous and I just wanted to go so bad. And my senior year of high school, there was actually a trip, a school-sponsored trip through spring break to Dublin. And oh, I wanted to go. I asked my parents and they just didn't feel comfortable with me making that trip, only being 17 years old. And now as a mom, I totally get that. But unfortunately, just 2 years later, when I was 19 years old, I lost my vision. And my husband since then has asked me, Chelsey, you always had this dream to go to Ireland. Do you want to go? And I do, but not in the same way, not in the same passionate way that I used to before. And my husband was confused. He's like, why? And I was like, well, because I really just wanted to see the landscape. That was the main thing that I wanted to do in Ireland. And now it's just not the same. It's just not. And so maybe one day I'll go to Ireland and I'll find lots of other creative, fun things to do besides gazing at the beautiful land features. But you know, it's just not quite the same now. And that is kind of hard and that's kind of sad. That's a dream that I had to let go of that is still a little painful, but there are much worse things. So the next question I have for you is, how do you pick out clothes as a blind person? And the answer to that is not well sometimes. I've noticed it helps a lot when I have less of them. So right now I've gotten really behind on decluttering and I have a closet that is filled with clothes that are covered in burp stains and food stains from cooking and taking care of my kids. And I can't quite tell which t-shirts they are because I like a certain cut of t-shirt. So I just buy all the different colors and I don't know which ones are stained and which ones are not. And I've been behind on laundry and it's a mess. So I don't do it well, but I've noticed that the less clothes I have, the more specific I am in what I like to wear, the easier it is to recognize the article of clothing that I'm holding. So when I grab something off the hanger, I can feel and tell by the thickness of the fabric and the length and the cut, oh, this is my purple sweater dress, or oh, this is my green Sunday dress, or oh, this is my t-shirt and I know that I only bought it in blue. And that is really helpful for getting dressed, making sure I'm matching colors. They also make color identifiers. I used to have one, but I dropped it and it broke and I'm so behind on things just being busy as a mom. I still have not replaced it, which is very silly, but I mostly buy clothes that match black pants or jeans. So I don't really have to worry about what color t-shirt I'm wearing in the first place. And that is just another perk of not having a lot of clothes to pick from originally. That makes it a lot easier to coordinate as a blind person without having to ask my sighted husband for help. If you want to see more content from me, you can follow me on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, X, or you can check out my website, chelseapainterdavis.com. That is a great place to sign up for my newsletter or recommend a friend for the podcast. Do you know someone with an inspiring story? I would love to hear about it. Also, if you like what I do and you want to see me at one of your events, you can click on the Book Now tab of the website and submit a speaking request. I would love to connect with you. Thank you so much for hanging around through the end of the episode. I hope we have shown you today that all life is worth living. Just like in the book of Esther, where God paints a beautiful portrait from the background, God is painting a beautiful portrait with your life, and we can learn so much from each other if we share our stories. Whenever it feels like the darkness is pressing in, just remember the words of Jesus Christ in John chapter 9. As long as I am in the world, I am the light. There's airplanes outside.